Today I want to help you understand exactly what it is that you're going to be quizzed on this week. It is going to be over 10.1 through 10.3. One cool thing about this section is I am going to allow you to use a cheat sheet. So this cheat sheet is giving you all the formulas that you're going to need to know for finding the surface area of the different objects we've been learning about, prisms, cylinders, and pyramids. And then also, if you remember, we've talked about before lateral surface area. This is not the entire surface area of the object, it's just the sides of it. So there's a different formula for that for the cylinder. But on your actual quiz and your test next week, you will be able to use this cheat sheet. This right here, however, is a part that you will not have on your cheat sheet. So this is something I do expect you to know. This is the formulas that we learned back when we were in school about what a triangle, square, circle, and rectangle is when you're trying to find the area. So make sure this part is memorized because this will not be on your cheat sheet for the quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and hop right into it. The first thing we're going to talk about today is finding the surface area of the prism. Remember, with a prism, you've got to figure out what your base is first. The base, if you remember, there will always be two, a top and a bottom. And this down here, I can clearly tell the base is a rectangle. So sometimes it helps also to see what this is right here. Well, if I can tell that this is a 2, that means this is also a 2, which means this right here is also going to be a 2. So I'm going to go ahead and label that this little area right here is also 2 centimeters. So if you remember with a rectangular prism, you want to figure out what the length, the width, and the height is. Remember, the length is whatever it is that you're looking straight at. The width is going to be the side length, and then the height is obviously what's going straight up. So if you don't have it memorized, you can use your cheat sheet to understand that the surface area of a rectangular prism is surface area equals 2 times the length times the width plus 2 times the length times the height plus 2 times the width times the height. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the length times the height. So you can see I've got 2 times the length times the width. If you notice, that's going to be this area down here. I'll kind of shade it in for you. And then we know that's the bottom, which means this up here is the top. So those two, that's why there's 2 of them, because you're doing the bottom and the top. So we can tell by looking at that, my length is 2 and my width is 13. So this right here is that yellow part, and then also remember it's going to be the top part too. The next part asks us to find 2 times the length times the height. So if I'm trying to find the length times the height, this right here we know is our length, and then the height is this area going up. So just to help you visualize it a little better, I'm going to go ahead and shade it in. So finding that, my length we know is the 2, and my height going up is 7 centimeters. Now remember, the reason why we're doing it times 2 is because there's also this area right here that mirrors exactly that same purple area that I just highlighted. Now there's one last part. It is 2 times the width times the height. So the width and the height is going to be this area back here. Obviously, when doing that, you can see that's this back area back there. It's also this area right here. If I were to shade it in, you could kind of see covering it up right there. Those 2 sides are going to be what we are multiplying for the width times the height. So we know our width is 13, and then the height is still going up 7. I was hoping that maybe for some of you visual learners, this color coding would help make it a little bit more clear. So if you want, just go ahead and pause the video now, try to multiply out that and figure out what the total surface area of this rectangular prism is. All right, so now you can see I multiplied the things that were there inside of the parentheses, and now we're going to multiply each of these little sections right here together before we add them together, because according to PEMDAS, you want to multiply first. So we've got 52 plus 28 plus 182. When you add all of those things together, you find out that the surface area is 262 centimeters squared. All right, example 2, still the same instructions, find the surface area of the prism. Once again, always look at what your base is first. Now remember, a base, there's going to be a top and a bottom. A figure like this is tricky. Sometimes people might think that the base would be this rectangle right here, okay? But if you count, there are actually 3 rectangles. There's that one that I just said, there's this other one right here in the back, and then also there's this one down here on the bottom. So it's not a rectangular base because there are 3 rectangles. Instead, what you want to focus on is think that this figure has been turned on its side. But if it were standing straight up, then you could see right here, the bases are actually triangles. So this is going to be a triangular prism. Once again, you might have it memorized, but always you can check it with your cheat sheet to see that the surface area, we know we have 2 bases plus the area of the lateral faces. So remember, the 2 bases are those 2 things that are top and bottom, and we just discovered that those are triangles. So we know that we're going to have 2 bases, and a triangle base for the area is half times base times height. Now you can clearly see that the lateral faces are rectangles, and there are 3 different lateral faces. So I have a rectangle plus another rectangle plus another rectangle. At this point, you can start plugging some numbers in. So we know we're going to do half times the base. You can see our base down there is going to be 4 inches, and then the height for that triangle base is 3. Now, this is where it gets tricky. When you're looking at your different rectangles, each of these rectangles are actually going to have a different length. So the first one that I am looking at right here is going to be this one right there. So I can see it is 8 by 5. So if I'm doing that 8 by 5, oh, sorry, we're going to go ahead and do length times width for each of those. We do 8 times 5 for that first one. Plus, now let's go ahead and focus on this one back here in the back, this yellow rectangle. So you can see it's still going to be the same 8 for our length, but then we're also going to have the width there on the side is going to be 3. Now finally, we're going to deal with down there toward the bottom. And this last rectangle that's down there. And you can see that that one is, the length is still 8, but the width is 4. Now all we have to do is start multiplying those things out. 2 times 6 is 12, 40, 24, and 32. And then finally, the last thing you've got to do is just add up all of those. So we add up the bases, we add up all of the lateral faces, and then we will see that our correct answer is 108 inches squared. All right, so those are the 2 kinds of prisms you might find on your quiz this week, is a rectangular prism or a triangular prism. We also have another shape that we've talked about, and that's finding the surface area of a cylinder. Now, if you remember, when finding a cylinder, we need to know the radius. What has been given to us here, though, is the diameter. Remember, that's the distance all the way across. So if my diameter is 16 centimeters, we know that if I was just trying to find out just this little distance right here, we would have to cut it in half, which means my radius would be 8 centimeters. So with this one, we're going to start off once again with the formula. On your quiz, please make sure that you guys are starting off with these formulas at the very top. So if you remember right here, you can see this is a picture of a circle. Okay, we've got a circle on top and on bottom. So my base is going to be a circle. So if you had this memorized, you would know pi r squared is the formula for finding the area of a circle. Then you have to add the lateral faces. Remember that thing around the side. So that would be 2 times pi times r times h. Now all you have to do is start plugging the numbers in. 2 times, we know pi, we always use 3.14. Remember the radius, because we've cut it in half, is 8 squared plus 2 times 3.14. Once again, our radius is 8, and we know that our height is 21. This multiplied together is 6.28. 8 squared, if you remember, you want to multiply 8 times 8, which would be 64, plus 2 times 6 is 6.28, and 8 times 21 is 168. Okay, so you guys can definitely pause me at this point and check to see if you're getting the same thing that I am. Then when you add those two together, we discover that it's 1,456.96. But if you remember up here, it asks us to round to the nearest whole unit. So remember, you're going to ask, you take your whole number and see if you should round up or keep it the same. Obviously, we are going to be rounding it up here. So our final answer is 1,456 centimeters squared. Main thing about this kind of a problem is always check to see, does it give you the diameter to start with, or does it give you the radius? Now this instruction here is slightly different. All this asks us to do is find the lateral surface area. Now remember, lateral surface area is just the sides, okay? So this kind of a shape, we know a cylinder, the bases are circles. The main difference here is when we would normally start finding the surface area, we would start with the base. But this time, since it's only lateral surface area, I do not want the base. I am literally only trying to figure out this right here, the soup label, the outside part of the soup label. So normally the surface area for a cylinder, you would find 2 times pi r squared plus 2 times pi r h. But once again, as I just said, because we are not using the bases, I don't need to know this information. I am only going to be using this part of our formula. So now let's just plug in for that part. We've got 2 times pi times the radius. Notice it does give us the radius here, not the diameter, so we're going to multiply times 4, and then my height is 6. Just working step by step, this is 6.28 multiplied times 24. When you multiply those two together, 150.72 inches squared. Always look carefully. As you can see for this one, I did not ask you to round anything. Just double check on your quiz before you submit. Does it ask you specifically to round something or to keep it as it is? The final shape that we talked about that will be covered on this quiz is the pyramid. I put a picture down here at the bottom so you can see the base down here at the bottom obviously looks like a square. So that's the same idea that we have here. This base down here is a square. You can tell it's a square and not a rectangle because I only gave you one length. So if that's 5 centimeters, it means the rest of these have to be 5 centimeters too. So this down here at the bottom is a square. So whenever you're trying to figure out a pyramid, that's what you always have to figure out. What is the base? In this case, our base is a square. So if you're using your cheat sheet or if you have it memorized, you're always going to find the area of the base plus the area of the lateral faces. Remember, the area of the lateral faces is simply talking about what sides are coming up to make that point. So you can see down here, these are the sides. All those sides that come together to make a point, those are our lateral faces. So this right here, you can see each of the triangles are going to be the lateral faces. So now we'll go ahead and start by plugging some things in, finding the surface area of the base. Remember, our base is a square, so you should have it memorized in your head. A equals S squared is how we find the area of a square. Plus, it says the area of the lateral faces. Well, you have to figure out how many different lateral faces there are. Since you can see down here I've got a square, obviously we know a square has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, which means there are 4 lateral faces, and the shape of the lateral face is a triangle, which means I'm going to be multiplying it times half times base times height. We know that the side length is 5, so it'll be 5 squared plus 4 times half times the base is 5, and our height is 8. 5 squared, 5 times 5 is 25, plus 4 times, if we're looking at this, 5 times 8 is 40, and then half of 40 is 20. And we know 4 times 20 is 80. When I add together 25 plus 80, you get 105 centimeters squared. All right, I've got one final problem for you. We're going to find the surface area of the pyramid. The main thing you want to look at here, remember, we want to check out the base. If I am looking at the base of this pyramid down here, I can see this is no longer a square. That is obviously a triangle. So that's going to be the one thing that's different from this pyramid versus the last pyramid we did. I want you to pause the video and see if you can do this one on your own. So our formula is the same as it before. The surface area equals the area of the base plus the area of the lateral faces. We know, as we just said, our base is a triangle. So we've got half times base times height. Now, a triangle has 3 sides. So as you know, this is 1 side, 2 sides, and then 3 sides. So for here, when we are adding this, we are going to be adding 3. And then if you're looking at what shape it is that's going up, those are also triangles. So half times base times height because they're triangles. If you haven't already tried it on your own, pause the video, try to do the rest on your own. All right, let's see if you got stuck here. First thing, if you remember, we are talking about the area of the base. So we want to look at the object that's down there at the bottom. Half times base, my base is going to be this right here, 17, times the height. This is talking about the height of the base. So this area down here. As you can see, this down here is my height for that base. And you could see that height is 14.7. So we're going to multiply times 14.7. This part can trick some people up. Now once again, remember we're doing the lateral faces. Those are the triangles that are going up. Multiplying half times base. The base is still going to be the same because it only gave us one base. But now we're talking about the height of the lateral faces. Remember, those are the things that go straight up to a point. So that's going to be my 13.8. So now we're continuing to plug in numbers. 17 times 14.7 is 249.9 plus 3 times, if I am taking 17 times 13.8 and then dividing it or cutting it in half, I'm going to get 117.3. Multiplying these out now, I get 124.95 plus 351.9. Add those together and you get 476.85. And remember, it has asked us to round it to the nearest whole number, so it's going to round up to 477 feet squared. All right, I know that's a lot of information. Hopefully this was a good review for you. Don't forget, go ahead and go do the review homework on the Big Ideas portal. Also remember, you need to do the Kahoot review before actually taking your quiz. And when you take your quiz, please remember, text me a picture of your work on Remind. Good luck on your quiz.